well, you just press W and you go through the instance. But these guys have been cooking up all kinds of strategies to be able to get around some of the more disruptive areas here.
Yeah, even though it's on rails, there's definitely different places where you can choose to get your count and different orders in which you can, choose to progress through the dungeon. So I'm interested to see what a team like Echo can do here to give themselves an advantage against Does Gargoyle Stream.
Let's dive into it. Echo versus Does Gargoyle Stream, starting up in Sanguine Depths.
Right off the bat.
Interestingly enough,
good.
I was gonna say double Venthyr Vengeance Demon Hunter, really starting off both sides with that Door of Shadows Disorient, Dratnos.
Yeah, the Venthyr is a strong choice in this dungeon because it can activate those lanterns. And Venthyr for Vengeance Demon Hunter is actually, it's a pretty underrated covenant, I would say, given how many Kyrians you'll see on the live servers, because it does bring access to that General Draven Soulbind, which gives you a 10% damage reduction below 40% health, which is a pretty powerful effect for a tank, especially for a tank that can often spend quite a bit of time at low health and can be pretty tanky at that time.
But does the Draven Soulbind have access to the Disorient on Door of Shadows?
Oh, so if they're going for the Door of Shadows Disorient, I think that actually is a different Soulbind tree. So
I saw
IQ
have that, so I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe they need the Door of Shadows Disorient, and that they feel to be better, or maybe that the Soulbind tree there is a higher damage one. But we can see already, the Cheat Death has been procced on the side of IQ. That's something that I'm sure was not part of the plan. I don't expect that they were planning to use the Last Resort this early on. In addition to the tank side, we've also got some differences actually between these teams in the DPS rosters. On the side of Echo, we're seeing Fragments on that Unholy Death Knight, something that we've seen him on a lot, whereas Gargoyle are instead opting for the Marksmanship Hunter, the Kyrian Marksmanship Hunter. What do you make of this decision?
I mean, we've seen Frag on the Venthyr Unholy Death Knight an awful lot. So not only will it just be on the burden on clicking the lanterns be on now, but it can also potentially be on Fragments. Unholy Death Knight, and specifically Venthyr Unholy Death Knight, just means that you're going to expect really large trash pulls on top of a lot of high priority mobs. They don't have like great damage conversion this expansion anymore, like they did last expansion. But at the same time, Unholy Death Knight definitely still has some of the best AoE in the game. But pack density is seemingly very low in a dungeon like Sanguine Depths, where I would expect the Kyrian Marksmanship Hunter to kind of pull ahead. Maybe you feel a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, you can see they got some good value right there out of the anti-magic zone. There's quite a bit of magic damage in this dungeon, against which that can be quite effective. You can see that their healths are dropping quite low on the side of Echo, so good value being realized there from that part of the Death Knight kit. I think also, if you're looking at something like the Inspiring Affix, the ability to grip an Inspiring mob, maybe out of the pack, then you get to interrupt something that's in the pool. There's a lot of utility in addition to the damage, which I do think is pretty close between Hunter and Death Knight.
Interestingly enough, here comes the barrier. Whenever the Ticks and the Brute are pulled into Crixus, this is oh my goodness, that charge is so scary. Now almost procs his Last Resort, but is able to get topped up before that ends up happening. Now they'll have to deal with the Shattering Slam here and soak those orbs here in just a moment on the side of Echo. Gargoyle has down their Pride finally, and will be pulling Crixus with, it looks like just the Brute from on the small screen. So here's the Severing Smash. How many orbs are they going to soak? So now actually begins to kite the boss immediately as opposed to soaking his own orb. And he's just going to let Zalia on that Priest hit the orbs as he deems is necessary. This is what I would say is a more safe strategy for live realms too whenever you're pushing. After the Severing Smash, maybe soak one or two that are already pre-assigned, and then just kind of let your healer soak them at his own discretion. That seems to be the best cause of action.
Yeah, healers are usually the ones that are most in touch with, whether the group is in danger or not. And so letting them manage that danger, I think, is definitely important. Although you got to make sure that your healer is actually going to soak them and not just let them reach the boss. Because if any of those orbs do reach the boss, it heals for a tremendous amount.
Yeah. So the upside is that the healer is in total control, but the downside is that the healer has to move and soak them occasionally. So now you see...
Yeah, we've had our second death on this boss fight on the other side here on the Gargoyle team. They had one battle res, which they were able to resolve their first death with. The second one is not going to have that option. And they still have a boss above 50% health with just 4 players left on their team. That boss is going to take a long time and be very difficult for them as a result of this. We'll see what they decide to do, but this is definitely an unpleasant situation. Oh, it's healing.
Oh, Crixus is getting healed. Yeah, that's probably going to be a wipe for Gargoyle.
They're jumping off. Yeah.
Yep. That's an unfortunate situation, and now they no longer have offensive CDs, and they're missing a lot of power for that. On the opposite side, though, Echo, really strong position. You see good use of CC, such as the Cage and the Paralysis coming out on those inspired mobs. Inspiring, of course, does work similar to Beguiling Season 3 Emissary of the Tides, where it does not allow nearby mobs to be kicked or CC'd of any kind. So making sure that they separate out the pull in order to have the Obliterator casters be able to be kicked as they, or the oppressors, not the obliterators, the oppressors to be able to be kicked as they do see fit is really nice, and then pull the two inspired mobs together after the fact.
Yeah, Inspiring is an affix that I think is one of the ones that varies the most in terms of how it feels between Tyrannical and Fortified. When Fortified is going on, there's just so many casts that you really do not want to allow to go off. And the mobs have so much health that you can't really nuke them down before stuff gets dangerous. And so it really becomes important to have these finesse-based strategies, imprisoning mobs that are, affected by the Inspiring Aura as needed in order to manage the affix rather than just kind of YOLOing it, letting it come in and hoping it doesn't kill you.
Inspiring is also definitely one of the affixes that's the most dungeon to dungeon specific. I feel like there are some on death affixes such as like bolstering and whatnot that varies wildly dungeon from dungeon. Inspiring which mobs are inspired and like which mobs need kicking definitely feels a lot different going from a dungeon like Theater of Pain, which has a lot of high priority kick mobs in some sections of the dungeon, to a dungeon which I don't know, what would be like a low kick density dungeon? Maybe something like Mist of Tyranid Scythe or something like that.
I think we saw Inspiring.
No, Mist would even be hard too.
Right?
Yeah, Mist would even be hard too.
Well, there's a couple mobs that need to be interrupted, but there's a lot of counterplay as well beyond interrupts, right? Like you can mass dispel some of the stuff that you could otherwise interrupt there. Whereas in a dungeon like Sanguine Depths, many of the things that, if you fail to interrupt them, they're just going to do tremendous damage rather than, force you to use a global on some other answer.
Yep. Now Echo here fighting another Pride. I wonder what they're going to do after this Pride. I suspect that they may end up be looking to do a skip after this, because there's a lot of trash in this section that you see most groups on Live Realms pull, but I don't know if it's the most efficient trash. I feel like for MDI situations, a lot of the trash in this area is just more time costly, especially with those Overseers. They are electing to pull them. I feel like the Overseers are normally like really slow though.
Yeah, this pull is nice because you have this Venthyr lantern that's been opened on the other side here, and it looks like they're actually going to
get it through the
wall here, so they can avoid. So, okay, this is nice because if you fight on top of the lantern, there's a patrol that can come and get you. But if you fight here, it looks like you're still in range of that lantern charging you up with that massive 5% stacking damage and healing up to 10, so up to 50%. They've gotten that 50% damage and healing buff now without having to risk fighting in a dangerous spot and only fighting those relatively harmless mobs that live inside that room. So a great little development there from Echo that I don't think we've seen out of the other teams, but I expect that we will see out of them going forward because that seems like a no-brainer.
That's a big brain move, and it allows you to get that lantern. We saw teams, I think, yesterday skipping that lantern because, like you said, that patrol, like the lantern is nice and the buff is good, but at the same time, the opportunity cost of like having to wait for the patrol is entirely too high, and like you're not just going to sit there waiting for the patrol, especially in an MDI situation. But that from Echo seems like that will be a standard play. On the side of Gargoyle, just a little bit of an update. They did down Crixus, the Destroyer, the first boss. IQ, I saw die and had to like run back, so they've had a few more deaths, but they are continuing to make their way through the dungeon, trying to catch up as quickly as they can to Echo. I do believe that wipe on the first boss was a pretty costly time loss, though.
Yeah, it goes to show the volatility of this dungeon as well, because Gargoyle is actually the team that we saw win yesterday in Sanguine Depths against Golden Guardians. So they had a clean run, and they upset a team that, a storied MDI team in that run. But, now they're having another run in here that's looking a lot less clean, right? And it just goes to show the inherent inconsistencies of a dungeon with so many difficult bosses and trash pulls. We didn't even see them wipe to a super massive pull of any kind. We saw them just wiping to the first boss, and I think there may have been a little bit of trash on it, but that first boss just really goes to show it's such a hard boss.
There are 3 bosses in this dungeon that I would describe as very difficult. The next one here that we're going to see from Echo, Executioner Tarvald, is probably one of the most dangerous mobs or dangerous bosses in the game. His castigation cast, which is that channel, is incredibly dangerous, and then he summons those ads that pulse AoE.
Yeah,
whenever
and there's
you
an
have any
overlap as
overlaps-
well. Yeah.
Exactly. The overlaps with the castigation and the pulsing of AoE is really scary. Of course, since all these teams are Alliance and running meld classes, you are able to meld off one of the castigations, but they don't have access to something like a Hunter, which can feign death every single castigation cast if it's on them. But they do have some like immunities and other major defenses. But yeah, like you said, it can be dangerous. I would especially say that it's mostly dangerous for Xaylia if he gets target with the castigation like 2 to 3 times in a row. That could potentially be costly.
Yeah, everybody else has tools to save themselves, and Xaylia can save them with, pain suppression or whatever as needed. If Xaylia is targeted, he's only got his own globals to save him, right? I guess there is anti-magic zone available from Pragnans as well, which could be helpful. So we may end up seeing a clutch AMZ being used on something like that. I expect that the AMZs are going to see good value throughout this dungeon. One place you can reliably get good AMZ value is just against a Prideful mob. Prideful mobs, they pulse for tremendous amounts of magic damage as the fight goes on longer and they get more and more stacks. So that's one of the best ways. If you're playing a Death Knight and you find yourself going through these dungeons and never pressing AMZ, try and make a habit of at least pressing it every time you do a Prideful.
Yeah, it'll help your healer out a tremendous amount. So now the group of Echo has pulled this Sentinel with this trash pack. Those Scribes, they look like they may say throw research on their books. Those guys are basically just archers. That's just like another version of shoot. It's a physical damage book, I guess. And then you have the Vestige of Doom, and he drops a puddle consistently whenever he dies, and just over time, that puddle, I think, ticks instantly if you're standing in it. So making sure that your tank is constantly kiting it is quite important.
Yeah, the beautiful ground graphic that we've seen, associated with Eventhier in these dungeons and in Castle Nathria as well. Really, really great looking one. Really not one that you want to look at from inside, though. You want to admire it from afar whenever possible.
Yes.
Now here, procs his Darkness. Now yesterday was running this legendary as well. It's the Darkness legendary you get from PvP, actually, on the live servers. You automatically trigger Darkness when you fall below 35% health. And even though Vengeance doesn't normally have access to Darkness in their kit, they can trigger this legendary as well. And you saw that come out, which it's a pretty potent piece of utility. IQ is running the more standard Fiery Soul legendary, which is just Fiery Brand cooldown reduction, a potent piece of defensive for oneself in a consistent way, rather than that sort of cheat death style Darkness proc.
I don't know how I necessarily feel about the Darkness legendary. I know that like Vengeance doesn't have a lot of for MDI specific, like great MDI specific options for legendaries. But yeah, maybe that Darkness one we'll see more standardization across the weeks. Like you said, though, the Fiery Soul, Fiery Brand one is also quite strong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Now has tried that one. It's a pretty obvious one to try. So I imagine that he's spent quite a long time deciding to use the Darkness one instead. And it seemed like it's been pretty valuable for them so far as well. It looked like in one of their dungeons yesterday, they were even potentially intentionally triggering it on Prideful mobs to provide an extra group cooldown.
So we've seen 2 castigations come out from Executioner Tarvald, and they have not used any Shadow Melds on that, which is actually great news because they did have one add with the first castigation, but it got burned so quickly with combustion and a lot of defensives coming out. All right, so Miraz here has Karma. He does kind of drop a little bit low, but that touch of Karma is just enough to be able to keep him up. Now, the ground effect is dropping, like I said earlier. It does tick instantly, so you need to move out of it quickly. Just great job by the melee and the tank to be able to move the boss. And now you just see, oh my goodness, the ghouls are being pulled with the with this boss. So, okay, those ghouls are massive tank damage.
Yes, but they are only tank damage, which is notable, right? That means that you can safely pull them as long as your tank is going to survive. It looks like Now is committing his 3-minute cooldown Metamorphosis to live this, and you can see even though he used that, he is still almost dying. He's going to soak that curse as well, it looks like, from the tornado. This is a tough spot as the tornado is overlapping with right at the same time that a castigation is going out. You can see the whole group is getting so low. Ring of Peace is going to be used to keep those ghouls off of Now for a little while longer. He does still have his cheat death available, but he'd really rather not proc it here if he can avoid it. You can see the Sigil of Misery is going to be used to help stabilize them a bit, keep some of those ghouls out while they finish off the boss, and Now has enough threat that he can just run away here. Does not need to get near those things, especially when they are enraged.
Yeah, those things are very scary. Their Shadowy Claws ability, it just does an absolute massive amount of magic damage. I'm surprised that Echo is electing to pull those. Those ghouls are maybe some of the most inefficient mobs in any of the dungeons in Shadowlands. They give very little count relative to the health that they end up having. I think they're like 2 count apiece or something like that. It's something like astronomically low. So whenever you're devising a route, those things do a lot of tank damage. They don't give great count. If you can potentially avoid them, I would almost recommend avoiding them at under most circumstances. Obviously, Echo is doing something that is very MDI specific with that.
Yeah, this kind of MDI mindset of, we want to max out on a bunch of different categories.
Pull it into the
right?
boss.
So the boss,
Yeah.
This boss is a boss that's, it's mechanics intensive, it's group damage intensive, it's actually not tank damage intensive. So if there's mobs that exist, even if they're inefficient on count, that only adds tank damage, you can add them into that boss pool because you really want to try and, get the maximum value out of your time.
They also get the pride spawning off of it, which makes me wonder if they're about to pull this third boss with the pride buff and all the trash here.
We've seen both Gargoyle and Golden Guardians do that yesterday. One thing that both Gargoyle and Golden Guardians did yesterday, though, was CC the Inspiring Oppressor here, rather than just letting it come in and allowing the other Rack Souls to be free cast. But Zaylia says, you know what, I don't mind that. You guys will nuke him down nice and fast. You've got Jinji bursting on that Fire Mage. You got Miraz popping Joanne as well and Weapons of Order, and they are not going to live long enough to be a problem.
Yeah, that was absolutely excellently done. Just being able to know how much damage you need to be able to pull the Inspiring Mob in, so then you were just more efficient with the pull itself, able to burn it all with just your CDs. And I would almost describe that as like passively cleaving it down while continuing to hit the boss. Look at the boss's health. The boss is already like sub 30% HP on the side of Echo. Gargoyle still is making their way towards the second boss. They have had 2 more deaths since we last took a look at them. So they are continuing to make good progress, but they are pretty far behind. At this point, they would be hoping for a massive failure on the Echo end, I feel like.
Yeah, Echo shows no sign of that happening. It's a very rare occurrence for something like that to happen to Echo. It is not impossible. It has happened before, but they are, I would say, the team that has that happen to them the least of all the teams I've ever seen in the MDI.
Yeah, they're definitely looking unwavering right now. Zero Death's going through what I would describe as probably the hardest dungeon for Shadowlands. This dungeon is pretty brutal. All right, so this is a common MDI strategy from what we've seen so far. Everybody's electing to use invisibility potions to be able to stealth past this pack. This is notable because while these packs are both really slow, and you probably do them one at a time on live, the upside of them is if you do have a death on General Call, which is the final boss here that you have to fight in the gauntlet, you are able to release and run back to your group. However, since you burn the invisibility potion, in this situation, if they do have a death, they basically have to fully commit a battle res. Now actually drops below 30% HP, proccing that auto darkness, and is standing there. He pops his metamorphosis and is tanking 2 packs at once while on top of General Call.
Yeah, General Call, this area is actually quite dangerous for tanks as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of extra damage that goes out, especially if you are combining pulls like this, but now he's able to make it work there, even though he took a lot of damage up front. That Darkness Legendary popped. I think he probably waited for the Darkness to proc before then using further defensives so that he would be able to stack those defensives together and become very tanky for the next 10 seconds. Quaking overlapping with their barrier usage. You can see AMZ is going to come down to be used there as well, because it's really the only magic damage moment for the next couple minutes here besides the final Pride if they decide to fight that. They're moving now onto this Venthyr Lantern. Now is a Venthyr, but he is not the only Venthyr in the group. Fragments is also one, and I expect it will be Fragments that has opened that Lantern rather than now.
Are you able to parry and dodge whenever you are clicking the Lantern? Do you know?
I don't believe so, but I'm not 100% confident.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, the reason I'm asking is because like the upside of now clicking it would be that Frag is able to do more damage,
and
but
Frag
the upside of
he's done a lot of damage on this pull, so perhaps he was that happened. Although now has also done a lot of damage on this pull. He's doing 10k damage as a tank, so it's not a bad time to be really anybody on the Echo squad here. The Echo rosters, they're you can be in 3rd or 4th place on this damage meter, and the number next to your name is still just absurd.
10k DPS, higher than most pugs I play in. So.
Yeah, you mean across the whole group, or from any given person?
For the top member of that group. Dude,
I see.
10k DPS, especially on trash pulls right now, is
To be
not
fair,
exactly the most common.
The pulls are larger in an MDI setting like this. You know, if you're combining pulls, you're buffed by the Venthyr Lantern at the later parts of the pull. All of those things will lead to the number going up, right? It's true that these players would do less damage if the pulls were smaller, but it's also true that these players are doing more damage than almost anybody else in the world would on these pulls.
Exactly. All right, so now General Call needs to be phased, I believe, to 70% at this checkpoint here before they will make their way towards that last little area. On the side of Gargoyle, they have down the second boss, and they're making their way into the third boss room. They're probably going to do a similar pull to Echo, or a similar pull to what we saw from them yesterday, where they do CC that one inspired mob, pull the rest of the trash in this room into the boss, and then try to nuke it down. But they don't have the pride like Echo did, that seemed instrumental to their strategy. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that was what allowed Echo to execute that pull without needing to do as many CCs. You can see on the small screen on Gargoyle side, 3 crowd control effects have gone out, and they are kind of slowly staggering in the trash rather than just pulling it all at once and nuking it down with the prideful buff.
Okay, so this is actually kind of scary from Echo. If they don't break combat at all, Xaylia is pretty tapped on mana, and they may get their final pride off of this trash pack.
He's doing fine. You drop combat after you kill a pack before the pride spawns. There's a little bit of time to drink there. He is playing that Night Fae as well, rather than the Kyrian, which is a higher damage, particularly a higher uncapped AoE damage. But yeah, they are just going to meld this pride. Pride is useful when it enables you. When it enables you to do a pull that otherwise would be impossible. It's actually generally not a time save if you're just going to use it to then go into a single target encounter, because you could just, it will make the single target encounter take less time, but the combined time of the pride and the boss is higher than just doing the boss without the pride.
Precisely. So now Echo has engaged in the final boss in General Call. General Call's final phase doesn't have too terribly many mechanics. You just need to dodge these lasers coming out of those visions on the ground. Obviously, there's that Wicked Blade? Is that actually the name of that cast?
I think it's Wicked Rush, but...
Wicked Rush?
I'm not 100%
Wicked Bleed?
Sure.
Whatever it is.
It does come
there's
with
that
a bleed. Yes.
Yeah, that goes on you. That it will cause some ambient damage. You see the bleed being applied to Fragments and Mirrors on their raid frames there. And basically, those are all the mechanics. Aside from that, you have the Gloom Squall, which is present across the whole entire General Call encounter, which is basically your tank pops the shield, and then everybody hops in the shield, and you should be good. Quaking is active, so there can be some potential for bad overlap.
A pretty tough Quaking overlap. The good news is that shield actually does reduce the damage of Quaking as well. So if you do Quake a couple people there, it's not the end of the world, but obviously you would rather avoid it.
Yep. All right, so there's another one. General Call, of course, does die at 50% HP, so if you notice the General Call's health is being reduced really slowly from 70, it is because the boss does die at 50, so they are a little bit over halfway through this fight right now.
Yeah, that is the 70 to 50% burn on Call is the end of the gauntlet. And you actually take her from 100 to 70 during the gauntlet, so there's more health to do to her during the gauntlet than at the end here when she's by herself. But, of course, she has way more mechanics here at the end.
Ooh, Dark and Dome coming out. Xaylia is actually really tapped on mana. Look at his mana right now.
Yeah, they just went right into this. They didn't give him time to drink, but you know what? They didn't need it because they have got the boss to 51%. There it is, the end of the dungeon. Echo is going to go up 1-0 in our series here in Game 1 of today.
Yeah, fantastic gameplay here by Echo, making sure they get through the Sanguine Depths really without any sort of issue whatsoever. And you guys are touching on it, and it made me really happy to see that we've had so much variety with these Covenant picks for Priest, because they're able to kind of choose whatever is going to be helpful to the team in a lot of cases. But for something like Sanguine Depths, where there's been so much pressure on the healer, and we were seeing how, both of the healers really were getting tapped on mana super hard, having that extra Fey Guardians to be able to start generating more and more mana for them really helped on that gauntlet. And you're really seeing that stark difference between the healers as they're going through some of those bosses, Ira.
Yeah, for sure. I think the major thing to take away from this is just how strong Echo's looked. We've only seen Sanguine Depths one other time this weekend, and that was actually in a match between Does Gargoyle Stream and Golden Guardians yesterday, where Does Gargoyle Stream had a relatively clean run with only 1 death, but it was 2 minutes slower than what we just saw from Echo. So Echo really just throwing out a statement there, showing people that they're not here to play around. Even though it's the first MDI weekend of the year, they're already back to their form.
That's right. Let's start going over the replay there because Echo just didn't have any deaths. They just kind of were cruising throughout the entire dungeon there.
Yeah, and I mean, it went from a head-to-head match to a let's see how good Echo can do pretty quickly. First little thing that I saw that I liked them doing, I don't think we saw this yesterday, is they actually pulled all this trash next to the wall, and the Vinthier candle is available, the lantern is open on the other side, so they actually get the buff through the wall. Pretty cool. And just showing their confidence throughout the dungeon, pulling a pack of 4 frenzied ghouls on top of an already difficult boss in Executor Tarvold. Who else will actually do that? These guys are just putting together efficient trash pulls, pulling together trash packs throughout the entire dungeon, and doing it better than pretty much anyone else right now.
No question. And, it's the amount of stress that's going on for the entirety of the team, being in those narrow hallways, trying not to quake each other and everything. It really goes just a testament to how strong Echo has been for such a long period of time here, Tettles.
Yeah, I mean, Echo definitely looked really, really strong in that Sanguine Depths. They ended up having 0 deaths. Azalea's mana was starting to get pretty critically low at the end, but the boss was already dead, so that didn't actually end up coming to affect anything. I felt like their best moment of brilliance was that second boss with the trash. Mm-hmm. Those ghouls and their shadowy claws, even though it is just mostly tank damage, that pull does not play around. I feel like that's where they actually got a lot of their time, is spawning that pride, like right after those ghouls died, right after the second boss died, and then we're able to transition that straight into a very clean third boss fight.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most interesting things, is looking at which pridefuls are they playing versus which ones are they not playing as well here, Dranos. Where they absolutely have to or want to be able to take advantage of it. And, those are the areas you can kind of like refill your healer on mana. And they entered the last boss fight with like 30% mana or something, and he just kept on cruising because he had so much regen.
Yeah, my understanding as a healer is if you don't finish the boss fight at 0% mana, you've messed up, right? You got to spend that whole bar, right? I think that was a good play by Azalea to use the whole mana bar. In terms of which prides are going to be skipped versus which ones are going to be played, I think that final pride of the dungeon is almost always going to be the most likely candidate for a skip, because at the end of the dungeon, you've just got that last boss generally, and unless you've got a way to do boss with trash or a big trash pull after boss or something, I think that it's just generally there is one where you're going to get the least extra pull potential from a pride. Whereas earlier in the dungeon, we saw them make use of the pride to enable pulls that would otherwise be impossible.
Yeah, and also tagging onto that, it's like Dratnos just said at the very end, the best prides are generally going to be the ones that enable and facilitate additional pulls on top of them. And the worst prides, the ones that are going to be skipped, are the ones that you're just going to take probably solo into a boss.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting to look at how Theater of Pain goes up for our next dungeon as well, Zyro, because prideful timings are going to be super significant, and also a lot of routing choices just from the very beginning of the instance.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the one dungeon I don't think we've seen at all this weekend. Theater of Pain was one of our time trial dungeons as well, and Echo, once again, top of the leaderboard there. Their time was about, a full 2.5 minutes faster than does Gargoyle streams, so... Yeah, you never know. Time trials are a finicky thing, even though you have a few days to practice them. Sometimes you just don't get to get your best run out in those first those 5 key runs that you get, so... Even though their time trial time wasn't the greatest on the side of Gargoyle stream, I have a feeling that this will be a little bit more competitive than the last dungeon.
Yeah, and that's going to be a nice thing for, does Gargoyle stream to sort of lean on, is that they know this dungeon, kind of getting some of the nerves out from the first game of the day, playing against the highest seed, defending champion opponents. They're able to go into this one and say, we know this, we've done this before, and we're going to be able to execute our own strategy. And, if they do end up taking it, it moves us into Necrotic Wake, which I think is might be one of the most flexible dungeons or crazy dungeons that we've seen very little of so far, Dranos. We got to see that entire snap pull from the Necropolis, but I feel like there's just even more that can happen there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they get to Necrotic Wake, how much either team has adopted strategies that we saw yesterday from teams like Golden Guardians in Necrotic Wake, where I think actually Gargoyle ended up losing that map to Golden Guardians yesterday, so maybe something they went back to the drawing board on. On the other hand, there's only so much time to practice. Maybe you wanted to put it instead into honing, getting used to Theater of Pain again. Sometimes the time trial dungeons, you don't end up practicing as much that week, and you maybe use your Friday time as a refresher on that, especially because Theater of Pain, second dungeon in the series, definitely going to get played, whereas Necrotic Wake is the third dungeon in the series, might not get there, right?
That's a good point as well. And they have to look at, which of the matches they're going to potentially play if they fall down into the lower bracket and start, again, kind of metagaming. I mean, you were mentioning actually at the beginning of the day, Drados, how are these teams, expecting to land throughout all the brackets? And in many respects, I don't think a lot of people were thinking that the Does Gargoyle stream was going to be beating Golden Guardians from the get-go.
Yeah, and so this has some interesting ramifications as well, because it means that even if they end up losing here and going to the lower bracket, where maybe they were expecting to already be in the lower bracket at this point, they'll be in a different spot in the lower bracket than if they had lost yesterday. And so they will have a different pathway to the end of the tournament.
That's right, yeah.
So that actually does complicate their strategy, but complicates everybody else's strategy as well, because everybody's has got different opponents and different dungeons going forward than if everything had gone according to the seeding. So it really just means that we're going to be in for teams adapting to the situation and to the environment, and that's what this kind of tournament's all about.
Yeah, I think that's why, week one is also kind of the best in many respects, because you might have a little bit of assumptions as to, who you're going to face up against, but first day, everything just goes completely out of the window and you just have to adapt. So let's see how game number 2 goes in theater between Echo and Does Gargoyle stream.
One of the things I'm going to be looking for in this dungeon is if anybody plays that Necrolord Covenant to get access to those banners, those versatility and movement speed banners that only a member of the Necrolord Covenant can interact with. We've seen Echo actually avoid that Covenant almost entirely, even on their Unholy Death Knight, which normally often does play it on the live servers. Fragments has been opting for the Venthyr instead. I wonder if that Covenant-specific bonus will be enough to kind of push that over the top and serve as a tiebreaker in the Covenant choice.
Yeah, so for compositions, what we saw from time trials for both of these teams was the exact same comp of Vengeance Demon Hunter, Disc Priest, MM Hunter, Fire Mage, Windwalker Monk. So basically, which one of these would you expect to play Necrolord, if any of them?
So in that context, I think that it's probably the Priest who is most flexible. We've seen Discipline actually playing all 4 Covenants, even in day 1 of our tournament yesterday. But it's a question of whether that banner is worth more or less than access to your preferred Covenant in terms of maybe Fae or maybe Kyrian. And here we go. We're going to get to see that momentarily as our teams are getting ready to go here. I'm expecting to see all of this trash pulled onto the boss for both teams here. That seems like it's pretty likely thing to happen, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's Bursting Volcanic. That's a pull that we've seen people even do on live realms. So I think that you're probably onto something. So on the side of Does Gargoyle stream, it looks like they do not have a Necrolord, whereas on the side of Echo, we'll be able to see in a little bit whether or not they have a Necrolord. Looks like the indicator for Zalia and Frag is messed up, but it will fix
needs
next
combat
time.
to update. Yeah, so we'll see that
Exactly.
on the next poll. Maybe we can catch it if we can see any spells. But yeah, wow, look at these bosses melting. You can already see Echo pulling to a little bit of an advantage just in terms of how much damage they've been able to deploy here. It looks like the damage, particularly on the Hunter department, has been looking favorable for Echo. Interesting that they have Gingy, one of the world's best hunters, actually playing Mage because that's the class that he has the most coverage of relative to their other players. It looks like it's Frag instead playing that Hunter.
I mean, Frag's been playing Hunter on live lately.
Yeah,
the MDI Echo team was actually pushing live keys for a little bit. They played double Hunter Windwalker Monk with mirrors on that Windwalker, and Frag and Gingy both playing Hunter.
Yeah, so the adjustment here on the tournament realm of Gingy over to the Mage, which is certainly a great spec for this sort of tournament. As you can see, Gargoyle ending up being 15 seconds slower on Boss 1. Not a great spot to be in terms of you're already losing quite a large percentage of time up against Echo when there really wasn't anything different between the 2 polls. And here we'll get to see exactly what happens here. It looks like Zalia
got look at his Fleshcraft.
And he is going to be opening that banner. So there it is. Zalia actually playing that Necrolord Discipline Priest, gets access to that Unholy Nova ability. But does mean that he also gets access to the 5% versatility and movement speed. Actually, it might be 10% versatility and movement speed from that banner for 5 minutes, which is pretty potent. It's for the whole group as well. Now he's going to grab up all of these mobs. He's playing Kyrian as well. I expect we'll see a Sigil of Silence after this Fell Devastation to help clean up all these mobs, stop them from casting quite as much. And yeah, they are going to nuke down all of these mobs, including with that Guardian.
So I think the difference in the hunter damage from the first boss, by the way, is the difference between Frag playing that Wild Spirits Night Fae Hunter versus Ramfam's Kyrian Hunter with the Resonating Arrow.
Yeah, so even though we actually see the same 5 specs on these two teams, we have quite a few different Covenant decisions, right? Because you're absolutely right. That Night Fae Hunter, we've actually seen a pretty even split between Night Fae and Kyrian, probably even leaning towards Kyrian in this tournament so far. But Night Fae does bring bigger cleave on a longer cooldown, right?
Definitely on a longer cooldown, and it's I think it's also more susceptible to being target capped.
Yes,
the Kyrian one. The Kyrian one, rather, Resonating Arrow, I think has a more susceptibility to being target capped, whereas the Wild Spirits of Force is uncapped. So now Echo has made their way to this landing area with this elemental, with the Portal Guardian. Ooh, interestingly enough, they do 3 Maguses with the Soulbinder. The Soulbinder does a Necrotic Bolt volley cast, and the Magus does a bunch of Bone Spike casts. The Bone Spike can be very dangerous, most notably for cloth wearers, because it is physical damage. There is like no plate wearers in this group, but basically everything dies inside of that silent sigil, so nothing was really scary there. They did only get 1 Soul Storm, which is not great, but it is something to deal with. So now the rest of the group of Echo does make their way through the portal. Now is going to shadow meld off that Pride, as the rest of his group has already made their way through, and now they are able to omit doing that Pride altogether, making their way towards this Bone Reaver pull.
And
which
this is
a Bone Storm
not
cast.
one that you see a lot on the live servers, this guy, but it makes a lot of sense when you have a comp like this and you just want some target that you can pump damage into and avoid wasting all of these cooldowns that you want to find a use for. There's not really any opportunity to do a massive MDI size 4-pack pull in a place like this, because you have to go to each of these platforms that only have 2 or 3 pulls on them. So this is a great way, and you can see they're actually going to bring it with them to pull these other 2 Bone Magi in order to get even more value out of this platform. And they are going to get a huge amount of trash from this Kultharok Lich section, which will allow them to skip a lot of trash in the Zav and Gorechop wings that might not normally be skipped.
But look at on the other side of Does Gargoyle stream in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Okay, so while Echo did go elect to go to this Kultharok Lich area, Does Gargoyle stream elected to go the Gorechop route as their opening section. So that's a little bit difference in routing. Chrono Grit's picked up by the Barbs coming into the Gorechop. They did pull some of the trash into this boss. This boss is a lot of tank damage generally, but IQ does have his Last Resort available to him in case he does take a lot of damage.
Yeah, this was a really unfortunate overlap for Chrono, of course. The chains came out, and he was rooted to his Rune of Power, as that ability does have that root effect, and so ended up being no way that he could dodge.
Did you notice something? On that grip cast, Dratnos, if you target yourself right as the grip is going to occur on you, you actually just land right at where you were standing. You don't get gripped all the way in.
Unfortunately, Ramfam has gone down for Gargoyle. They are going to try and res, but this is a difficult fight to find time to res in. Krona actually gets a genius res off during that hook, the hook's coming across the battlefield.
500 IQ res. Right
really
there.
well played by him there.
On the side of Echo, it looks like they're on their way to Kultharok. They just finished off a Pride. They're going to be able to have that damage bonus for the Lich boss. This boss has received a couple of nerfs since the game has come out, making it a lot more reasonable just in terms of like the damage output. But Disc Priest was one of the best healers at this fight before, because they do have access to that Master Spell for those dots that are applied to players.
Yeah, both these bosses have been difficult ones at different times. On this fortified setting, they shouldn't be too difficult or take too long. You can see Kultharok kind of melting here for Echo. It is, of course, going to be difficult for us to directly compare the times between these two teams for the next several minutes, because they've gone about this dungeon in a different way. Gargoyle has reached their second boss before Echo, although if you look at the boss's health, Gorechop is taking a long time to die, and Kultharok is getting destroyed by Frag here. What is Frag doing to this thing?
They're pulling the Shackled Souls off to the side. Look at that. They're pulling the Shackled Souls off to the side up to the Kultharok area. They just grabbed a couple with the boss that they skipped in the beginning. So that allowed them to have just a little bit additional cleave.
Interesting. So maybe they invis potted that section
They did,
with
yes.
the shackled souls, and then now pulled some at the end in, and then the early ones are here that they're able to pull in, and that allows them to very much fine tune their prideful timings as well. This is a really, really clever way to do this dungeon. Almost 50% trash as well, as they're only going to be getting to 40% of the bosses killed after Kultharok goes down. So they're a little bit ahead on trash in terms of progression versus the number of bosses in here. Let's see which wing they decide to head to next, as Gargoyle also going to be making a similar decision. They, of course, can go to either the duel section, and it is going to be the other one, though, that they're heading to, Gorechop's wing for Echo, with all of these nasty refuse mobs. Luckily, they're pretty low on health, so they can AoE them down really quickly with Gingy with that combustion. You can see those flame strikes already coming down. We'll be making short work, combined with actually no power infusion available for Gingy.
All right, so the teams are swapping swapping sides of where they're going. You see Gargoyle is going to that Kultharok Lich area, whereas Echo now making their way to the Gorechop area. So it seems as if Zav the Ruiner has been decided to be the last boss by both teams, so that will give us a little bit more of a description of about where these teams line up. Whenever Echo does end up down in Gorechop and whenever Gargoyle does end up down in Kultharok, it'll be easy to compare like 1-to-1 who is ahead.
Yeah, because they'll both have killed the exact same amount of bosses at that time, although we may still have a trash discrepancy between the two of them.
Sure.
I don't know how much trash they are planning to skip in the Zav wing, though. A lot of that trash is kind of finicky to skip, because it does put you in combat when those, the duelists win their duels.
Yep. Gargoyle does have a pride now that they're dealing with on this platform, where Echo is Invis potion? No, they just ran straight around that guy. They ran straight around that gas bag ad.
Frag pulled it to the side and presumably is going to feign it off. Yeah, so they didn't have to wait for the patrol.
So, yeah, I mean, because you can wait for the patrol for those who
that's
don't
the
know.
general strategy on live servers, is just wait for the patrol, not a big deal. But here, of course, 10 seconds is a big deal, and so they are going to find a different way to do that, even if it's a little bit riskier, even if it requires you to commit something like the Feign, as they're going to be killing some mobs, and the first couple mobs they kill in the middle of this pull are actually going to spawn this pride for them. I imagine that this is actually intended, because this means that they are kind of cleaving off this pride while killing off these last few mobs, and they are then going to be able to take the pride maybe into a massive pull.
Check it. Gingy has combustion available again for this pride right here. So this makes a lot of sense, because he didn't want to burn all of his offensive CDs on the opener. He probably just let Frag use his wild spirits at the beginning, and then Gingy has that high health target that he's able to just cleave off of with combustion, be able to do as much damage as possible. Now the pride has gone down. I wonder if the side of Echo are going to elect to skip all this stuff. It seems as if the answer is yes. They're probably going to meld it all off. Yep. Right here, really good Ring of Peace coming in from Miraz to make sure that all the mobs are at bay, to where they're able to get a little bit more degrees of separation away. Like on the side of Gargoyle, they have pulled this Bone Reaver too, though.
Yeah, so the Bone Weaver is a common point for both of the routings of these teams. But Echo here, they're actually going to use this pride not only to nuke Gorechop on pull, they are also going to grab that one pull that's just by the door here. So they skip that gas bag and the other little trash mobs on the bridge, but they are going to pull these ones in. And I'm curious to see if they'll try to pull even more in once these things die, and kind of try and keep cleaving stuff down while killing Gorechop. Gorechop, of course, not an easy boss. It does have trash of its own and does have a lot of mechanics to handle, so perhaps unlikely to see if anything more comes in.
Echo's use of offensive CDs is actually immaculate in this run. So they used Wild Spirits to be able to get the Pride spawning. Then they used Combustion on the Pride to be able to get that down quickly. Miraz saved his CDs, and so then he pops Zwin and Weapons of Order and Storm, Earth, and Fire on the beginning of Gorechop to be able to start to burn him down with those two ads that they pulled into it. So really just a great management of who is popping what when, which is something that is really important for MDIs, to have great consistency with your CDs and to have good CD timings to where you're not overcommitting offensive cooldowns more than you have to.
Yeah, and you really want to make sure you're also getting as many uses of your cooldowns throughout a dungeon generally.
Yes.
Although, a couple of good cooldowns, a couple of perfect cooldowns can be better than just firing them off at will, and that's why you're seeing them delay their cooldowns as needed there. A little bit of a rough chain overlap there. Saw it committed Gingy's Ice Block to manage it, but no worries. They're able to get it done. And actually,
that's one of those times that you would click on yourself to target yourself to make sure that you didn't get gripped in.
I see. Yeah, here's one of the times where we can actually compare these two teams pretty directly, because you can see at this point, Echo has killed all of the same bosses and more as Gargoyle, and all the same trash and more as them. So they are certainly ahead at this time. I would say they've opened up a pretty substantial lead, which is very impressive, given that nothing has really gone wrong for Gargoyle. They haven't had any wipes. They've had one random death during the Gorchop fight, and that did cost them a little bit of time, but it's not like they're having a disaster run. It's just Echo has been finding a very speedy path through this dungeon.
I would say that they're probably an order of magnitude something like 2 minutes ahead still. So something similar to what we actually saw the discrepancy in their MDI time trial timings would be. So.
Which makes sense, the time trials are 2 minutes apart. The most likely time for them to be apart in the live key or in the tournament run is probably 2 minutes, of course, with a wide amount of other options that were a possibility. But we're only halfway through the dungeon, right? The 2 minute lead could expand. It could also shrink. Things could get a lot closer, particularly if something does go wrong for Echo.
Yep. So now Echo is why are they positioning like this is what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, never mind. They're spawning their pride away so then they can meld it off.
Yes, and that pride, actually, I think that if it's in that doorway, does that mean that they're going to pull it before they go up to Mordretha, the last boss?
So they'll have somebody who starts the RP from Mordretha. They'll leap back down.
Okay, hang on. Isn't that also where you get sent to duel, down in that area? Is it possible that they want to pull it with players who are dueling and then have it come in during the Zav fight?
Oh, wait. That is where you have to duel.
Well, they left it in a spot where they don't have to pull it. They left
I think
it in
the door
doorway,
may be closed.
so they might be able to avoid pulling it during the duel if they wanted to. But is it a possibility that they might actually want to pull it while dueling?
So the door is closed during the duel, so they may have actually spawned it outside the door so that the pride is not there. I would have a high suspicion that they're going to after Zav after the duel area. A party of 4 is going to start the pride. One of the players without CDs, I don't know which one, will probably run up, start the Mordretha, RP, leap back down, begin to hit the pride as well. Then they'll all, as a party of 5, hit the portal all the way up to the Mordretha final encounter of the instance, and then with their pride buff, be able to down that boss really quickly. That seems like that's the play, but maybe they have it actually spawned in the room with them.
Check it out. You invis pop past the pride, right? Everybody sneaks past it, and then Frag misdirects now. Every other player except for Frag goes up, and then Frag shoots the manifestation of pride and then feigns, and then goes up himself. And that way you can send it up and kill it while you're doing the RP, while you're waiting for the RP with all 5 of your players.
Pride doesn't snap there. It'll just sit there and evade out.
Well, that puts a real... That really rains on my parade here.
Having done this before, the pride will evade to 20 stacks and then snap approximately a minute into the Mordretha encounter at 20 stacks.
I would go ahead and describe that as probably suboptimal.
Yes, wiping your group is not normally what you want.
Meanwhile, you can see as Echo are almost about to get to Zav here, Lust is actually going to be popped by Gargoyle on the trash bowl that is nearby here actually as well. So they're in a pretty similar part of the dungeon to Echo. It looks like they've actually U-turned, perhaps, or no, they're just doing trash in this area. Yeah, and they have popped their Lust on it, whereas Echo still have access to Lust. And yeah, so here we go.
See the pride there for a second as Azalea walked in the room. It's important to note that the Echo players definitely do not want to pull the pride during the boss. I think that is a critical way that they would probably wipe.
I don't know. Maybe at the end of the boss, you start pulling it in, you cleave it down. It's a fortified boss. Maybe that's a way you could save some time. This is a pretty tricky boss, though. It's a boss also that adds, if you're not main targeting it, it spawns more and more banners, and those banners add a really nasty movement speed slow to your whole group. So you need to kill them.
So Frag and Gingy got elected to PvP here. It's very important to note that the person with the highest CR in Arena is the person who is allowed to win every single time. Frag showing that he is the highest Arena rating and is able to take down Gingy relatively quickly there with his aim shots and rapid fire cast. And it looked like the Pride did have the door closed on it, by the way. Just circling
so
back.
they spawned it outside the door. I mean, even if it was inside the door, they wouldn't have to pull it if they didn't want to.
Probably.
Because you do get some 40 yards in that dueling area. I know, having used the entire duel area in intense player versus player combat.
Exactly. You thought that you guys were watching the MDI, but in fact you are watching the AWC, where we also have some PvP action occasionally.
I mean, these players have all done a lot of PvP over the last couple months because it is such a great source of gear for them.
I've actually been enjoying Arena a lot lately.
Yeah, me too. I think the arena's in a pretty good place now. It's a little bit different here, and I don't think PvP scaling actually comes into effect when you get sent down to the duel here, so things are a little bit different even. Yeah.
Ooh, Frag and Gingy again.
Ooh,
We
they
know
just
that
keep
Frag
getting sent
has to
down.
win this one because he is the higher CR. Aim shot coming in. Gingy not even fighting back. Explosive shot. Frag then pops that rapid fire. Probably going to steady shot Gingy to death. Not wanting to spend any more charges of his aim shot.
I think Gingy could have really done that a lot better. He turned his back and didn't cast any spells, which I think probably hurt his ability to win that duel. So if he's looking for more strategies next time, try casting something like Fireball.
Making sure that he has his offensive CDs, his combustion available. Maybe wear that Triune
Triune
legendary
ward,
as
yeah.
well. Yep. It is getting nerfed on Tuesday, but it is still very potent in player versus player combat.
Oh, yeah. All right, so Zav goes down. Let's see exactly what Echo is going to do with this Manifestation of Pride. It is that they're going to fight it, and it looks like maybe Frag is going ahead. Yeah, Frag is going to drop combat with that Feign Death or the Shadow Meld so that he can go and start the Mordretha RP at the end of the dungeon.
Importantly enough, it's also Frag because the hole is still open whenever you go all the way up, and like he's able to disengage himself to make sure he's not going to take fall damage whenever he's coming back down. But right there, you see he leapt back down, but he disengaged right before, so then he's able to meet back up with the Manifestation of Pride and
Actually,
deal with
any
the kind
player
of
in this group could do that, right? You could levitate, you
Transcendence,
could
yeah,
Infernal
that's true.
Strike, you could Transcend, or you could Slow Fall. So all 5 of these players could do the run for that purpose. But yeah, you can see this is going to get them Pride onto Mordretha, but also they're not going to have to wait as long for that RP to finish. So really well optimized pathing here. And yeah, they are now on their last boss of the dungeon with full trash count. If Echo can kill this boss, that's going to be them done for the day, winning into the upper finals even tomorrow. So that would be a great outcome for them here in our first match of day 2. Gargoyle, meanwhile, would not be out if they lose here. They will be heading down to our lower bracket where we'll see them again later today.
Yep. Now Mordretha, it has been pushed sub 50%. They have to dodge that Clash ability and the charge. Those are probably the two most dangerous
Mordretha's health is just disappearing. This boss is already dead. The Bloodlust plus Prideful combo, it's really everything you could ask for against a boss like this, particularly with classes that are as bursty as Echo's classes. Look at the damage here. Mira's doing 13k single target.
Less than a minute spent in combat on this fight. Zalia is actually at 4k DPS on that boss as well, really showing up on the disc freeze.
What in the world? That Mordretha was just gone. That had to be like a sub-minute boss fight or something like that. Unbelievable. Echo taking the victory, taking the 2-0 sweep, as does Gargoyle Stream gets knocked down into that lower bracket. And we saw some good variety in some of the routing that was going on there, Zyro, and it was just Echo